Hello. Today I am in beautiful Sacramento. I'm currently at my friend's boyfriend's house because my flight got in before theirs did. And I've been here a couple days trying to entertain myself. We're all meeting here. We're going to celebrate his birthday at the end of the month. But I used that as an excuse to go see SoCal because I've been wanting for a long time to see if it lives up to all the hype. And honestly, I get it. While I was in SoCal, I went to Joshua Tree because I wanted to see the national park. And it was the first time that I was solo in a national park. I didn't do any camping, but I did do some solo hiking. And I wanted to discuss some of my tips for beginner solo hiking. Yeah, nothing too crazy, but whenever I read articles, I feel like there are tips and things that I do that are really important for making me feel comfortable and for actually like having a successful, like stress-free experience. Yeah, so let's get into it. All right. Solo hiking. So as I mentioned, I recently went to Joshua Tree and was wandering around the desert. Lots of fun. And I've done, I'm by no means like a solo overnight camper. So this is just for people who are dipping their toes into solo hiking, okay? Don't come for me. This is not for overnight backpacking. This is like completely new Susie who likes to go hike with friends and is like tired of waiting on her friends to go hike alone sometimes, okay? That's who this video is for. Glad we cleared that up. So, in no particular order, my tips. Okay. This one is important, okay? This is like the one that mentally changed the game for me, all right? When you are dipping your toe into hiking by yourself and you are planning your route, okay, beforehand, you're choosing what route you want to do. Do an out and back trail. Do not do a loop, okay? Because this is much less mentally taxing than trying to figure out an entire loop. Because if you do an out and back trail, the hardest part is, or the most mentally taxing part is getting to wherever that out point is. And it's very rewarding because you say, okay, I've successfully gone the first half of this trail. If it's out to a particular something, there's probably going to be like a cool, rewarding point of interest that you've hiked to. So then you get to see, oh my gosh, this is the view that I hiked to, or this is the cool rock formation that I was hiking to, or whatever. So you have the affirmation that, yes, not only did I correctly follow the trail to this point of interest, I get this reward of seeing this cool point of interest. And now all I have to do is just go back the way I came, and that will be a successful trail and a successful first solo hiking trip. So do that because it's a lot. It's kind of mentally taxing when you're out there by yourself and you're trying to say, okay, am I on the trail? You're looking around, listening to your surroundings constantly. Maybe you're keeping an eye on a paper map or something. There's a lot of things that are going on in your mind. Also, will I have the ability to retrace my steps if I were to get confused or lost on the trail, So it's a lot of different things that are happening in your mind, and you can actually get kind of overwhelmed, when you're new to being out there alone. So my high, very, maybe obvious, less obvious recommendation for new solo hikers is choosing an out and back trail. Okay? I don't think anyone has said that. It's important. Do that. Okay. Next tip. Go early in the morning. Early. Like early. When I was in Joshua Tree, the lady was like, look, temperatures are so hot, we are not recommending that anyone hike after 9 a.m. And I was like, You don't have to tell me twice. We are out here in the literal desert. Like, already, what kind of an idiot goes to the desert in the middle of the summer to go hike? The least I'm going to do is listen to the park rangers who have seen people literally die out on trails. So go early. Obviously, if you are encountering like extreme heat and weather conditions like I was, but it's also great for beating crowds. You don't have to stress yourself out about finding a parking spot. But also, this kind of goes hand in hand with my next point. You have to consider an early start time because it goes into planning and having a turn back time, okay? What is a turn back time? I always have sort of an unofficial turn back time that I'm calculating as I'm hiking. So this is more so if you're doing a loop, okay? Granted. But basically, I ask myself if I would be able to make it back to my car or trailhead before dark if I stopped wherever I was and turned around instead of finishing the loop. Okay, why would you need this? There are several reasons, you know. Maybe if you're hiking in bear country, on the path in front of you, you see some baby bear cubs. Okay, if that happens, you cannot continue forward. You have to literally say, okay, that part of the trail is dead to me. I need to turn around now, because obviously you cannot cross, you cannot get close to baby bear cubs, okay? Maybe it starts thundering and lightning and you're like, I'm on unfamiliar trails. I don't want to continue along. So you're like, I'm just going to turn around, okay? Maybe also you aren't sure if you're actually on the correct trail and you're afraid of getting deeper and deeper into the woods or unfamiliar terrain. It happens. So it's okay. You just say, you know what? I'm just going to turn back. I'm just going to retrace my steps, and I had a lovely adventure. That's what it is, you know? So if you're doing an approximate like 4-hour hike, you, in theory, at any point along that hike, need to have enough time to turn around and go back, okay? I know, it sounds insane. Well, if it's a 4-hour hike and you're 3 hours into the hike, it makes way more sense to just finish the loop. It does. But this is being very safe, because when you're hiking alone, you just want to have all of the options available to you, okay? Okay, this one's more optional, but I'm trying to give you all the options here, you know? Use a GPS watch to your advantage, okay? So again, obviously you don't need a GPS watch. You don't need like a GPS app, but they are helpful because it's helpful to track how far you've walked. So it gives you a sense if you're like, okay, I know that this section of the trail is half a mile long. So it's great to be able to corroborate, okay, my watch is telling me I've walked half a mile. I should be coming on the next, you know, marker, trail marker. It's also really nice after you're done with your walk to say, oh my gosh, like, look at this loop that I took, and then compare it to what your original trail was and see if you stayed on it perfectly or if you took a detour or how long you took in one area or another. So I like using my GPS watch as kind of like a double check. Again, primarily to match up distances, to help me with timing, to say, okay, it took me an hour to go, you know, 1.5 miles in this really steep terrain, then it should put me about, you know, 4 p.m. to finish this trail. Okay. You can also use apps like Strava, but use those judiciously because they can obviously drain your phone battery, and you may or may not have, like, you know, an external battery back at your car or in your backpack or something like that. I'll leave that up to you. Okay, another thing that people don't talk about is you need to have a mentality of when you're hiking alone to not panic, honestly, because when you panic, this is when bad things actually happen. Like I've listened to a bunch of like missing 411 stories, and while I certainly do think that there are situations that animals probably have been the culprits behind, hiker disappearances, I'm more inclined to think that what precipitates a lot of these disappearances is that people get disoriented, people get spooked, they hear or see something, they panic, and then they run off the trail. And then they really do get lost, and they really can't find their way back to the trail, and then die of exposure and, succumb to the elements. So you doing smaller hikes to start, really building up, your tolerance for stress and a little bit of feelings of uneasiness as you're, wandering the woods alone, is really important. Just this mentality of like, don't panic, I can handle this, everything's fine, I have a backup plan if necessary. Very important. Quick little story for you. One of the hikes that I was doing in Joshua Tree, it was not that long. It was like a 4-mile loop. And I had to turn back because I felt myself just kind of panicking. The trail was marked okay. Like I definitely could see the markers as I went along, but it's a very strange feeling to be in this vast expanse and in a canyon all alone. It's very eerie because it feels like you should be surrounded, you should see something somewhere, some signs of life. And sure, you hear like cicadas and there's bugs and things, but it's broad daylight, yet there's no one around for miles and miles and miles. It's a very eerie feeling. So that was in the back of my mind. I was starting to psych myself out. And as I was hiking, I was doing little mental checks and saying, okay, there's this rock formation. Okay, there's this tree. Okay, there's this identifying marker that I could pick out if I had to turn around and go back. But then the deeper and deeper I got into the canyon, honestly, all of the rock formations started to look alike. So that also started playing into my fear of like, wow, would I actually be able to find my way back? And this feeling of being afraid if I was actually on the correct trail. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm feeling myself starting to panic. Like, I just got to go back. I'm not going to tough it out. Like, again, I'm in the middle of nowhere in a desert, like completely alone. So I had to turn back. And it kind of sucks because honestly, there are so many cool parts of Joshua Tree that you just cannot access from like the parking lots and the short loops that they have for people who are not trying to do intense hiking. But you gotta know your limits, unfortunately. Okay, so those are the main ones that I think are like unique and helpful that I hadn't seen listed in like your typical how to solo hike article. Okay, but then some other ones, of course. Check the weather before you go and don't go if it's dangerous. In New England, I've done hiking before where, a lot of New England mountains are notorious for the weather changing rapidly. And when I was hiking, there were some like sheer like rock faces and it started raining. And I was so scared because I was like, I could literally slip off the side of this cliff, like right now, like slip off the side of this rock, tumble down a cliff. Like, it's a long story, but yeah, the weather looked kind of 50-50 and my friend and I were like, let's just go for it. We went for it. It started raining really hard. It turned dangerous quickly. So I'm glad we got out okay. And my friend and I, we had each other, we were there for each other and there was moral support, but yeah, it was a little bit of a dangerous situation. Okay, know about local wildlife, okay? Primarily where I've hiked on the East Coast, like you're not going to be in danger of wildlife really. Like you might see a deer. Like we have some snakes, but I think like I've seen like a handful of snakes in my entire life during living on the East Coast and hiking East Coast. I've never even seen a black bear, and friends of mine that have encountered black bears when hiking, they're like, it's really easy to just like scare them off. So, but obviously there's things like poison ivy. You have to be careful about ticks. You know, we have really bad humidity in Virginia, so obviously carrying plenty of water is important. But just know about local wildlife, local weather conditions, that sort of thing. Okay. Have proper equipment. I'm not going to go too much into proper equipment because, you know, I'm not a big stickler on really needing anything in particular. If you can follow trail markers, then like good. And if you can't, like just you shouldn't be out there hiking. But, you know, things to consider: taking a compass, paper map, and then of course like proper clothing, like proper hiking boots, sunscreen, hat, bug spray, long sleeves, pants, etc. If you are getting more advanced and doing longer solo hiking, something like a beacon or a GPS communicator is really good for emergencies. I don't even have one yet because then it gets complicated because you have to have like a Wi-Fi package for your communication device. So I haven't gotten too into the weeds about that, but I might have to eventually if I continue doing solo adventures. Okay, along with having like a beacon or like a GPS communicator, you know, prepare for no cell service. So, yeah. And then this is actually ironically like the number one rule of hiking alone that I'm putting last because it's so obvious, right? It's number one to everyone. Is tell someone where you're going in explicit detail. So, what trail you're hiking, when you're going to start the trail, when you should be back in communication, and when you would like another person to contact, like park services or the police, if you are not back or not in communication within a certain time, okay? So it's important that you stick to your plan. This means planning ahead, so knowing which trail you're going to do and sticking to that plan, and then following up at the end of your hike as well. Because if you go missing, you can be found, but you have to have given whoever is looking out for you enough information to help you. Funny little story about that. My aunt and uncle, I was visiting my aunt who lives in Colorado. She's married to this very outdoorsy man who does 14ers and skis and hikes and bikes and all of the things. And he and I went on a hike, and well, he did this. He told my aunt, you know, in explicit detail which trail we were going to go do, when we should be back, all of that. She's very familiar with a lot of the hikes in this part of Colorado where they live. So she knew approximately how much driving time it takes to get out, to get back, how long it should take to complete, all that sort of thing. But then when we get to the trailhead, he basically tries to give me a crash course in like operating a gun. So they are gun owners. He had like a handgun of some sort on his hip. And he's basically like, okay, Anne-Marie, if things were to go sideways, like take my gun. And if you have to defend yourself, this is how you use it. And he's like showing me how to turn the safety on and off and how to like hold it. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I guess in an emergency situation, maybe I would be able to pull it out, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't know, man. So that was funny to me, but also sort of like a wake up call. Like, it's real. This is real. Like, you're out there in the wilderness. Like, you have to be prepared. You have to have plans, like backup plans. And, you know, you have to have like a little bit of mental toughness because things do happen when you're not prepared. It seems silly, but you have to be over prepared. Like the Boy Scout motto, be prepared. It's true. Way better to be over prepared than under prepared. Okay. Okay. I think that's everything. Did I forget anything? Oh, last thing I will say. Make your hiking excursion easy on yourself by the night before. Pick out your clothing, have all your snacks laid out, fill your water, have your backpack, have your shoes, have your clothes, everything laid out. Put gas in your car and have your, addresses that you're going to inevitably punch into your GPS, figure it out. Like, make your life the morning of as easy as possible, okay? Because again, going back to like point 2, you're going to be getting up early in the morning and you don't need a bunch of like annoying logistical things in the morning slowing you down. Okay? Okay. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Hope this inspired you to get out there and be brave and be safe and enjoy your time in nature.